Chapter 3. This year, the Buddenbrooks took no holiday during Christian's and Clara's vacation. The consul said he was too busy, but it was Tony's unsettled affair as well that kept them lingering in Mengstrasse. A very diplomatic letter, written by the consul himself, had been dispatched to Herr Grunlich, but the progress of the wooing was hindered by Tony's obstinacy. She expressed herself in the most childish way. "Heaven forbid, Mamma," she would say. "I simply can't endure him," with tremendous emphasis on the second syllable. Or she would explain solemnly, "Father." Tony never otherwise said anything but Papa. "I can never yield him my consent." And at this point, the matter would assuredly have stuck had it not been for the events that occurred some 10 days after the talk in the breakfast room. In other words, about the middle of July. It was afternoon, a hot blue afternoon. The Frau Consul was out, and Tony sat with a book alone at the window before the landscape room, when Anton brought her a card. Before she had time to read the name, a young man in a bell-skirted coat and pea-green pantaloons entered the room. It was, of course, Herr Grunlich, with an expression of imploring tenderness upon his face. Tony started up indignantly and made a movement to flee into the next room. How could one possibly talk to a man who had proposed for one's hand? Her heart was in her throat, and she had gone very pale. While he had been at a safe distance, she had hugely enjoyed the solemn conferences with her father and mother, and the suddenly enhanced importance of her own person and destiny. But now, here he was. He stood before her. What was going to happen? And again she felt that she was going to weep. At a rapid stride, his head tipped on one side, his arms outstretched, with the air of a man who says, "Here I am. Kill me if you will." He approached. "What a providence!" he cried. "I find you here, Antony." He said, "Antony." Tony stood erect, her novel in her right hand. She struck out her lips and gave her head a series of little jerks upward, relieving her irritation by stressing in that manner each word as she spoke it. She got out, "What is the matter with you?" But the tears were already rising, and Herr Grunlich's own excitement was too great for him to realize the check. "How could I wait longer? Was I not driven to return?" he said in impassioned tones. "A week ago I had your father's letter, which filled me with hope. I could bear it no longer. Could I thus linger on in half-certainty? I threw myself into a carriage. I hastened hither. I have taken a couple rooms at the city of Hamburg, and here I am, Antony, to hear from your lips the final word which will make me happier than I can express." Tony was stunned. Her tears retreated abashed. This, then, was the effect of her father's careful letter, which had indefinitely postponed the decision. 2 or 3 times she stammered, "You are mistaken. You are mistaken." Herr Grunlich had drawn an armchair close to her seat in the window. He sat down. He obliged her to sit as well, and, bowing over her hand, which, limp with indecision, she resigned to him, he went on in a trembling voice, "Fraulein Antony, since first I saw you that afternoon, do you remember that afternoon when I saw you, a vision of loveliness in your own family circle? Since then, your name has been indelibly written on my heart." He went back, corrected himself, and said, "graven." "Since that day, Fraulein Antony, It has been my only, my most ardent wish to win your beautiful hand. What your father's letter permitted me only to hope, that I implore you to confirm to me now in all certainty. May I feel sure of your consent. I may be assured of it. He took her other hand in his and looked deep into her wide-open, frightened eyes. He had left off his worsted gloves today, and his hands were long and white, marked with blue veins. Tony stared at his pink face, at his eyes, which were as blue as a goose's. "Oh, no, no!" she broke out rapidly in terror, and then she added, "No, I will never yield my consent." She took great pains to speak firmly, but she was already in tears. "How have I deserved this doubt and hesitation?" he asked in a lower, well-nigh reproachful tone. "I know you are a maiden cherished and sheltered by the most loving care. But I swear to you, I pledge you my word of honor as a man, that I would carry you in my arms, that as my wife you would lack nothing, that you would live in Hamburg a life altogether worthy of you." Tony sprang up. She freed her hand, and with the tears rolling down her cheeks, cried out in desperation, "No, no! I said no! I am refusing you, for heaven's sake! Can't you understand?" Then Herr Grunlich rose up too. He took one backward step and stretched out his arms toward her, palms up. Seriously, like a man of honor and resolution, he spoke. "Mademoiselle Buddenbrook, you understand that I cannot permit myself to be insulted?" "But I am not insulting you, Herr Grunlich," said Tony, repenting her brusqueness. Oh dear, why did all this have to happen to her? Such a wooing as this she had never imagined. She had supposed that one only had to say, "Your offer does me great honor, but I cannot accept it," and that would be the end of the matter. "Your offer does me great honor," she said as calmly as she could, "but I cannot accept it. And now I must go. Please excuse me. I am busy." But Herr Grunlich stood in front of her. "You reject me?" he said gloomily. "Yes," said Tony, adding with tact, "unfortunately." Herr Grunlich gave a gusty sigh. He took 2 big steps backward, bent his torso to one side, pointed with his forefinger to the carpet, and said in an awful voice, "Antony!" Thus for the space of a moment they stood, he in a posture of commanding rage, Tony pale, weepy, and trembling, her damp handkerchief to her mouth. Then he turned from her, and with his hands on his back, measured the room twice through, as if he were at home. He paused at the window and looked out into the early dusk. Tony moved cautiously toward the glass doors, but she got only as far as the middle of the room when he stood beside her again. "Jeez Louise, motherfucker." "Tony," he murmured, and gently took her hand. Then he sank, yes, he sank slowly upon his knees beside her. His 2 gold whiskers lay across her hand. It's in exclamation points. "Tony," he repeated, "you behold me here. You see to what you have brought me. Have you a heart to feel what I endure? Listen. You behold a man condemned to death, devoted to destruction, a man who will certainly die of grief." He interrupted himself. "If you scorn his love, here I lie. Can you find it in your heart to say, 'I despise you'?" "No, no," Tony said quickly in a consoling tone. Her tears were conquered, pity stirred. Heavens, how he must adore her to go on like that, while she herself felt completely indifferent. Was it to her, Tony Buddenbrook, that all this was happening? One read of it in the novels, but here in real life was a man in a frock coat, on his knees in front of her, weeping, imploring. The idea of marrying him was simply idiotic, because she had found him silly. But just at this moment he did not seem silly. Heavens, no. Honorable, upright, desperate entreaty were in his voice and face. "No, no," she repeated, bending over him, quite touched. "I don't despise you, Herr Grunlich. How can you say such a thing? Do get up, please do." "Then you will not kill me?" he asked again, and she answered in a consoling, almost motherly tone, "No, no." "That is a promise?" he cried, springing to his feet. But when he saw Tony's frightened face, he got down again and went on in a wheedling tone. "Good, good. Say no more, Antony. Enough for this time. We shall speak of this again. No more now. Farewell. I will return. Farewell." I hate this man. He had got quickly to his feet. He took his broad gray hat from the table, kissed her hand, and was out through the glass doors in a twinkling. Tony saw him take his stick from the hall and disappear down the corridor. She stood, bewildered and worn out, in the middle of the room, with a damp handkerchief in one of her limp hands. Chapter 4. Consul Buddenbrooks said to his wife, "If I thought Tony had a motive in refusing this match, but she is a child, Betsy. She enjoys going to balls and being courted by the young fellows. She is quite aware that she is pretty and from a good family. Of course, it is possible that she is consciously or unconsciously seeking a mate herself, but I know the child, and I feel sure she has never found yet her heart, as the saying goes. If you ask her, she would turn this way and that way and consider, but she would find nobody. She is a child, a little bird, a hoyden. Directly once she says yes, she will find her place. She will have carte blanche to set herself up, and she will love her husband after a few days. He is no beau, God knows, but he is perfectly presentable. One mustn't ask for 5 legs on a sheep, as we say in business. If she waits for somebody to come along who is an Adonis and a good match to boot, well, God bless us. Tony Buddenbrook could always find a husband, but it's a risk after all. Every day is fishing day, but not every day catching day, to use another homely phrase. Yesterday I had a long talk with Grunlich. He is a most constant wooer. He showed me all his books. They are good enough to frame. I told him I was completely satisfied. The business is young, but in fine condition. Assets must be somewhat about $120,000, and that is obviously only the situation at the moment, for he makes a good slice every year. I asked the Duchamps. What they said doesn't sound at all bad. They don't know his connections, but he lives like a gentleman, mingles in society, and his business is known to be expanding. And some other people in Hamburg have told me things. A banker named Kesselmeyer, for instance, that I feel pleased with. In short, as you know, Betsy, I can only wish for the consummation of this match, which would be highly advantageous for the family and the firm. I wonder, what the thought just struck me, it's described in the book that the consul's wife isn't very, conventionally attractive, so maybe he's, mad that he couldn't get a beauty, so he's cursing on his daughter to get not a beau. That's just a silly thought. I mean, it's probably really just because it's a good business match. Betsy, I can only wish for the consummation of this match, which would be highly advantageous for the family and the firm. Ew! So he wants it for the family and the firm, not for her. I hate this time period. I am heartily sorry the child feels so pressed. She hardly speaks at all and acts as if she were in a state of siege. But I can't bring myself to refuse him out and out. You know, Betsy, there is another thing I can't emphasize often enough. In these last years, we haven't been doing any too brilliantly. Not that there's anything to complain of. Oh, no. Faithful work always finds its reward. Business goes quietly on, but a bit too quietly for me. And it only does that because I am eternally vigilant. We haven't perceptibly advanced since Father was taken away. The times aren't good for merchants. No, our prospects are not too bright. Our daughter is in a position to make a marriage that would undoubtedly be honorable and advantageous. She is of an age to marry, and she ought to do it. Delay isn't advisable. It isn't advisable, Betsy. Speak to her again. I said all I could this afternoon. So he's trying to get her a nice life also because their business is going downhill a little bit. Tony was besieged, as the consul said. She no longer said no, but she could not bring herself to say yes. She could not wring a yes out of herself. God knew why. She did not. Meanwhile, her father would draw her aside and speak seriously, and then her mother would take up the tale, both pressing for a decision. Uncle Gotthold and family were not brought into the affair. Their attitude toward the Mengstrasse was not exactly sympathetic. But Sesame Whitebrocht got wind of it and came to give good advice, with correct enunciation. Even Mademoiselle Youngman said, "Tony, my little one, why should you worry? You will always be in the best society." And Tony could not pay a visit to the admired silken salon outside the castle gate without getting a dose from old Madame Kroger. "A propos, little one, I hear there is an affair. I hope you are going to listen to reason, child." One Sunday, as she sat in St. Mary's with her parents and brothers, Pastor Coling began preaching from the text about the wife leaving father and mother and cleaving only to her husband. Oh my gosh, she's getting it from everybody. Oh, the pressure. His language was so violent that she began listening with a jump, staring up to see if he were looking at her. No, thank goodness, his head was turned in the other direction, and he seemed to be preaching in general to all the faithful. Still, it was plain that this was a new attack upon her. Every word struck home. A still childish girl, he said, could have as yet no will and no wisdom, and if she set herself up against the loving advice of her parents, she was as deserving of punishment as the guilty are. She was one of those whom the Lord spews out of his mouth. I hate the Christian religion too. With this phrase, which was the kind Pastor Coling adored, she encountered a piercing glance from his eyes, as he made a threatening gesture with his right arm. Tony saw how her father, sitting next to her, raised his hand as though he would say, "Not so hard." But it was perfectly plain that either he or her mother had let the pastor into the secret. Tony crouched in her place with her face like fire, and felt the eyes of all the world upon her. Next Sunday, she flatly refused to go to church. She moved dumbly about the house. She laughed no more. She lost her appetite. Sometimes she gave such heartbreaking sighs as would move a stone to pity. She was growing thinner, too, and would soon lose her freshness. It would not do. At length the consul said, "This cannot go on, Betsy. We must not ill-use the child. She must get away a bit, and to rest and be able to think quietly. You'll see she will listen to reason then. I can't leave, and the holidays are almost over. but there is no need for us to go. Yesterday, old Schwarzkopf from Travemünde was here, and I spoke to him. He said he would be glad to take the child for a while. I'd give them something for it. She would have a good home, where she could bathe and be in the fresh air and get clear in her mind. Tom can take her, so it's all arranged. Better tomorrow than the day after. Tony was much pleased with this idea. True, she hardly ever saw Herr Grunlich, but she knew he was in town, in touch with her parents. Any day he might appear before her and begin shrieking and importuning. She would feel safer at Travemünde in a strange house. So she packed her trunk with alacrity, and on one of the last days in July, she mounted with Tom into the majestic Kroger equipage. She said goodbye in the best of spirits and breathed more freely as they drove out of the castle gate. Chapter 5. The road to Travemünde first crosses the ferry and then goes straight ahead. The gray high road glided away under the hoofs of Lebrecht Kroger's fat brown Mecklenburgs. The sound of their trotting was hollow and rhythmical. The sun burned hot, and dust concealed the meager view. The family had eaten at 1 o'clock, an hour earlier than usual, and the brother and sister set out punctually at 2. They would arrive shortly after 4, for what a hired carriage could do in 3 hours. The Kroger pair were meddlesome enough to make it in 2. Tony sat half asleep, nodding under her broad straw hat and her lace-trimmed parasol, which she held tipped back against the hood of the chaise. The parasol was twine gray with cream-colored lace and matched her neat, simply cut frock. She reclined in the luxurious ease proper to the equipage, with her feet, in their white stockings and strap shoes, daintily crossed before her. Tom was already 20 years old. He wore an extremely well-cut blue suit and sat smoking Russian cigarettes, with his hat on the back of his head. He was not very tall, but already he boasted a considerable moustache, darker in tone than his brows and eyelashes. He had one eyebrow lifted a trifle, a habit with him, and sat looking at the dust and the trees that fled away behind them as the carriage rolled on. Tony said, "I was never so glad to come to Travemünde before, for various reasons. You needn't laugh, Tom. I wish I could leave a certain pair of yellow mutton chops even further behind. And then it will be an entirely different Travemünde at the Schwarzkopfs on the seafront. I shan't be bothered with the Kurhaus Society. I can tell you that much. I am not in the mood for it. Besides that man could come there too well as not. He has enough nerve. It wouldn't trouble him at all. Some day he'd be bobbing up in front of me and putting on all his airs and graces." Tom threw away the stub of his cigarette and took a fresh one out of the box, a pretty little affair with an inlaid picture inside the lid of an overturned troika being set upon by wolves. It was a present from a Russian customer of the consul. The cigarettes, those biting little trifles with the yellow mouthpiece, were Tom's passion. He smoked quantities of them and had the bad habit of inhaling the smoke, breathing it slowly out again as he talked. "Yes," he said, "as far as that goes, the garden of the Kurhaus is alive with hamburgers. Consul Frisch, who has bought it, is a hamburger himself. He must be doing a wonderful business now, Papa says. But you'll miss something if you don't take part in it a bit. Peter Dolman is here. He never stops in town this time of year. His business goes on at a jog-trot all by itself, I suppose. Funny. Well, and Uncle Justus comes out for a little on a Sunday, of course, to visit the roulette table. Then there are the Mollendorfs and the Kistenmakers, I suppose, in full strength, and the Hagenstroms. Yes, of course, they couldn't get on without Sarah Simlinger. Her name is Laura, my child, let us be accurate. And Julchen with her, of course. Julchen ought to get engaged to August Mollendorf this summer, and she will do it too. After all, they belong together. Disgusting, isn't it, Tom? This adventurer's family. Yes, but good heavens, they are the firm of Strunk and Hagenstrom. That is the point. Naturally, they make the firm, of course, and everybody knows how they do it, with their elbows, pushing and shoving, entirely without courtesy or elegance. Grandfather said that Hinrich Hagenstrom could coin money out of paving stones. Those were his very words. Yes, that is exactly it. It is money talks, and this match is perfectly good business. Julchen will be a Mollendorf, and August will get a snug position. Oh, you just want to make me angry, Tom, that's all. You know how I despise that lot. Tom began to laugh. Goodness, one has to get along with them, he replied. As Papa said the other day, they are the coming people. While the Mollendorfs, for example, and one can't deny that the Hagenstroms are clever. Hermann is already useful in the business, and Moritz is very able. He finished school brilliantly, in spite of his weak chest, and he is going to study law. It's all very well, Tom, but all the same time, I am glad there are families that don't have to knuckle down to them. For instance, we Buddenbrooks. Oh, Tom said, don't let's begin to boast. Every family has its own skeleton. He went on in a lower voice with a glance at Jock's broad back. For instance, God knows what state Uncle Julius' affairs are in. Papa shakes his head when he speaks of him, and Grandfather Kroger has had to come forward once or twice with large sums, I hear. The cousins aren't just the thing either. Jürgen wants to study, but he still hasn't come up for his finals, and they are not very well satisfied with Jakob at Dahlbeck and Company. He is always in debt, even with a good allowance, and when Uncle Justus refuses to send any more, Aunt Rosalie does. No, I find it doesn't do to throw stones. If you want to balance the scale with the Hagenstroms, you'd better marry Grunlich. Did we get into this wagon to discuss that subject? Oh, yes, I suppose you're right. I ought to marry him, but I won't think about it now. I want to forget it. We are going to the Schwarzkopfs. I've never seen them to know them. Are they nice people? Oh, old Dietrich Schwarzkopf. He's not such a bad old chap. Doesn't speak such atrocious dialect unless he's had more than 5 glasses of grog. I never set the timer, I just realized. We're at 28 minutes. I thought it was going on long, and my mouth was getting tired. Okay, we'll stop it here. I have never seen them. I've never seen them to know them. Are they nice people?